Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, March 17th, 2020, St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day, except, as I said in the Morning Post, to all of you, snake Irish Americans who don't celebrate. We don't want to discriminate against you. We should recognize your grievance against St. Patrick. I assume that there probably is one. But I think maybe we can find a compromise or an alternative celebration for the day. How about Happy Pandemic Day? We could mark it that way. I also have another birthday in the family. So happy birthday to my little brother, Matt. Well, let's see. What else can we do? I don't want to linger over the personal news. We all have personal news today. Tough time to have a happy birthday wishes, don't you think? Because everybody's getting locked down, increasing closures across the country, increasing lockdown. Yesterday, new development, I guess, on the political front. Donald Trump, again, who purports to be president of the United States, if you can believe that, apparently, I guess, has been browbeaten into some kind of understanding of what's actually going on out there and how big the problem actually is. And so we've evolved from, we have this totally under control, very strongly under control, completely under control, to it's out of control. But of course, it's not out of control here in the United States per se. I mean, it is. It's part of the world. But he just he jumped immediately to no place in the world. The whole world is out of control with this. So it's not me. It's not us. We haven't done anything wrong or differently than anybody else, et cetera, et cetera. So no blame for him, of course. He's still not ready to accept that. But also ready to discuss the economic impacts of the pandemic and what it's doing to us and what it's likely to do for us in terms of diving into recession. The stocks, we'll keep an eye on them, I guess, this morning and see if there's a morning crash, as is usually the case. I don't know whether he's now talking himself out of giving daily speeches. Up until yesterday, he, I think, fully believed that every time he got on television from here on in and said whatever the hell it was he was going to say about the pandemic or anything else for that matter, that the markets would climb. Yesterday's comments I didn't get a chance to see, too busy preparing for keeping everybody at home as soon as possible. But word, of course, has reached KITM headquarters through various means that it too was something of a disaster, a melancholy tone. But I guess he stuck a little bit more to the script that the public health officials are trying to beat into him. They still had to step in to clarify things, of course. But I guess we're getting somewhere in all of this. The reality is beginning to seep through. This, of course, evidenced by, and maybe I can't possibly be coincidental, that when Trump finally comes around to forcing himself to say, yeah, this is a pretty serious problem and people need to be preparing for things, now there's lines at the gun stores. So the people who have been blowing this whole thing off now realize they need supplies, and so guns will be the way they get them. And it may work out that way. Of course, there are no other supplies to be had. So it may be that, like everything else, they think they frequently will tell us that all rights, all civil rights spring from the Second Amendment, that you can't have or at least safeguard or any of your other rights without being armed as against a tyrannical government or yucky liberals or any other sorts of, maybe brown people, I guess, are running around stealing civil rights from people, because the brown people have so many civil rights. You see, they must be hoarding them all. I don't really know what the logic is supposed to be. But off to the gun stores they go. Of course, they have spent the last couple of weeks insisting on shaking hands in mega churches, licking various things to show that they don't believe in the virus, calling it a hoax. if they believe it exists at all, it's a Chinese thing, and generally refusing to go along with the advice of public health officials, which I do wonder whether it might help in the end. For instance, they've been calling for us for years now, decades, to come and take it, the guns, of course, to pry the guns from their cold, dead hands. Of course, a lot of people will die with fevers, so I don't know how cold their hands are going to be, but they may very well be dead, and I guess we'll see how difficult it really is to pry the guns from their... well, eventually they turn cold, but I guess if you don't wait too long, you can still pry it from their warm, dead hands. But I guess they'll get their wish at some point. The only question is whether or not they will have shot you for toilet paper before that happens. So, anyway, lots to catch up on, as you might imagine. Plenty of news coming in from around the world, plenty of thoughts for us to go over. It's been real interesting too, watching the reactions of the not the stock markets, but the local markets to the emergency. I think we are going. I wonder how the impact will go, or whether we can flatten the curve of the economic impact a little bit by recognizing our interconnectedness and all this. Give us a interesting opportunity to do it. I don't know whether it's safe to try to flatten both the economic curve and the hospital demand curve at the same time. But we're telling ourselves, for instance, that, even those of us who are fully on alert and ready to believe the public health science and say, all right, we need to shut things down. The order goes out, for instance, for our states and localities to shut all businesses except certain ones which we immediately recognize as necessary to help people prepare and stay prepared to stay home, to practice as much social distancing as possible. The grocery stores, that would be important. People need to be able to make s'mores at home, or Orville Redenbacher popcorn while they binge on Netflix. By the way, I am concerned about the capacity of Twitter and other social media during these peak demand times. So you can do your part to flatten that curve by just making up your own mind what you want to watch on Netflix. It doesn't really need to be crowdsourced. They have a browse function. It's not very robust, and they could probably work on that. So let's say we keep open grocery stores, and then they said, well, the banks have to stay open in order for people to be able to get money to buy groceries at the grocery stores, or rather, in this day and age, process the payments that you pledge to make when you swipe your card, if you're fortunate enough to be able to shop that way. But the banks, the grocery stores, pharmacies, of course, many of which are inside the grocery stores, happily enough. But, of course, people need their access to their medication. And then they threw us gas stations so that you can drive to all these places, because why would your situation be walkable, right? Nothing wrong with that. Happens to a lot of us. So gas stations, banks, and the grocery stores were going to stay open. Everything else was going to close. Then, of course, they said, well, some people will need to be able to get food other than at grocery stores. Takeout. A lot of restaurants are staying open for takeout and, I guess, drive-through service at fast food restaurants only, which is fine. It's great. It keeps, a little bit of money flowing to the people working there. That's good. It keeps people fed. That's good. Still practicing social distancing for the most part. There's a little bit of interaction with the staff, but that can't be helped entirely unless we go back to like automat of some sort. There's still somebody has to be putting the little sandwiches in the windows there. You get the idea. But I think we'll probably quickly discover just how much more there is to all of this. I mean, over at the grocery stores, of course, a lot of that depends on making sure that your electricity, for one thing, is on, right? There needs to be people at the power plant. Your electricity has to be flowing and flowing correctly. So what happens if the refrigerator section breaks down at the grocery store, which is allowed to be open, but everybody else is shut? How about the electricians? Are they open? I gather that they'll let you. I mean, it's not, a total shutdown. There's no curfew being enforced day and night. So there's at least that. And, we have to make sure that there's an ability for everybody else to keep working too. And we shouldn't forget about those people. We should remember what goes into keeping this working. It just means you have to be washing your hands a lot while you are working on your not while you're working on your electrical projects, but you get the idea. What about the plumbers? Make sure that the bathrooms are working there so that the people working at the grocery store can wash their hands. I assume at some point we're going to want to ramp up manufacturing of more of that stuff that's missing from the shelves. Of course, we have to ship it to the stores and truck it to the stores, and then we have to make sure that the trucks have brake pads, if they still use brake pads, I don't know. Whatever, spare parts, the mechanics, the diesel mechanics that run the thing. Who's planting the wheat to make sure we have all of this stuff? Who's keeping tires on the tractors that is harvesting the wheat? Who's packing the fruit? That's actually a big question because that gets us, where that brings us to the immigration question. That also will be an important one. The point is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And frankly, there's a lot of work that needs to be done managing the work that needs to be done. Somebody's going to have to be there crunching the numbers to make sure that all of these things can happen too. So we'll begin to discover how much more work there is to do little by little and how much of it needs to be done at a distance, which of course then brings us to, okay, well now we have to bring back the network engineers. Who's going to make sure that everything's working fine at the server farms? Although I think workers at server farms are pretty cool with social distancing. I think like one guy per, 75 hectares, I think, is about what they're running out there. So I'm not certain that that's a huge issue. But it will remind us of how many people are working in the supply chain to keep it possible for us to shelter in place. And of course, your place will need repair too, right? It's not just the grocery stores, banks, and pharmacies that will need electricians and plumbers making emergency visits, roofers making sure the roof doesn't leak. There's a lot going on. So there's a lot to think about and a lot to think about the who's keeping your life running. How important are you? How important are they to you? Try not to shoot them when they show up. They're not here to steal your toilet paper. They're here to make sure that there's a roof over your head while you decide what to binge watch on Netflix. Okay. So that's a very interesting thing. There is some good news out there of sorts. I did discover this interesting, I had discovered this interesting long thread of good news that someone had collected about perhaps light at the end of the tunnel. But I guess some of it might not have been true because they've deleted their long thread. So that's kind of sad. But I don't know whether that means that the news was wrong or something happened to that person or some part of what they had collected was wrong and they eliminated the whole thing. And of course, it was lacking for links, unfortunately. But the hint was that China may be emerging from the back end of this tunnel. It seems like the number of new cases in some of the Asian countries initially impacted the hardest by the spread of the virus are beginning to get back to some sense of normalcy. It had been happening for some weeks now, people returning to work, et cetera, et cetera. The claims in this thread, anyway, were that the Chinese this we should be able to find out. The Chinese government was beginning to shut down some of the emergency field hospitals that they had opened up to deal with the overload, and that there weren't any longer enough new patients to maintain them, to keep them open, no reason to keep them open, which is good news. It's good news when work withers and you have to, I guess not lay off staff, but close down additional hospital capacity in the wake of a pandemic. So let's see. I wonder if we can find any news about that. That's too bad that we weren't finding. Oh, here we go. We got some news reports about it, which I assume are a little bit better sourced. Well, let's see. Here is a Reuters report of a similar nature. China shuts all temporary coronavirus hospitals in city of Wuhan, at least according to the state media there. And you always have to wonder about whether you're getting a straight story from that. But okay, China has now closed all temporary hospitals in the central city of Wuhan. I hope we're pronouncing that right. I wonder if we're... there's not too much to screw up with that, but I wonder if we got the emphasis right. Anyway, that, of course, was the epicenter of not the, but a coronavirus outbreak. Well done there, Reuters. A news website backed by the Shanghai government, The Paper, that's a creative name, said on its official Twitter account on Tuesday. I don't think the Chinese think our newspaper names are particularly creative either, but there you have it. That's a pretty short blurb. So, that's not super helpful, but the idea is a good one. Let's see if there's any better report. I mean, there are longer reports out there. We'll see whether the sources of them are any better or more trustworthy or what have you. I don't know. Let's see. There's the New York Post. I don't know what to make of that one. I mean, the rest of them are Chinese media sources. And I mean, this is dependent on a Chinese media source too. It's not like the New York Post has reporters on the ground in Wuhan, I don't think. Anyway, in a dramatic sign that the coronavirus crisis is improving in China, the last two of 16 temporary hospitals in the epicenter city of Wuhan have been shut down. According to a report, the final group of 49 patients walked, out of the Wuchang Temporary Hospital in the in the capital of Hubei. Is it Hubei province or Hubei? Probably Hubei province. Hubei, maybe. On Tuesday afternoon to cheers. That's nice. According to the Xinhua news agency. Did we get that right? Okay. The 784-bed facility, which was converted from Wuchang Hongshan Stadium. Oh boy. These are not actually all that difficult to figure out. Well, it opened on February 5th and received a total of 1,124 patients. Actually, pretty thorough here in the New York Post. This according to the news outlet that they were reporting from, which said 833 patients were discharged and 291 transferred to other hospitals. Meanwhile, a makeshift hospital in Wuhan's Jiangxia district was also shuttered on Thursday after 26 days of operation. Xinhua reported it had received a total of 564 patients, 392 of whom were discharged after recovering. We are beginning to hear the stories of recovery and what life is like after that. That's good news too. Zhang Boli, an academician. Are we using that word again now? That popped up once like a couple of years ago. Anyway, at the Chinese Academy of Engineering, said the 16 temporary hospitals had received a total of 13,000 coronavirus patients. Despite the closures, Wuhan, a city of 11 million, remains under lockdown after more than 50 days, which is fine. Keep going. Make sure you've got it under control. On Tuesday, President Xi Jinping made a high-profile visit to the stricken city, his first since the outbreak began. And probably a good idea to stay away until now. Almost 50,000 coronavirus cases have been reported in Wuhan, with 2,423 deaths. That's got to be pretty devastating for them. All right, let's see. I just happened to be reading down while we were reading down the article, a little sidebar section that the New York Post keeps on global coronavirus issues, and I guess showing in red every country on the map where the disease has shown up. Interesting where it hasn't. So, although I'm not certain whether it hasn't shown up there or whether it just hasn't been reported there, and in some cases you might guess it hasn't shown up. Greenland doesn't have any, or at least none is reported on this map. Who knows whether it's up to date? And I could see that. There's probably not a whole... I mean, probably pretty isolated from travel, generally speaking. Iceland, especially at this particular part of the year. Lots of Sub-Saharan Africa, though, there are definitely some red spots in there that are recognizable. And again, here it may be that there's not that much Western travel going on, or it may be reporting or diagnostic services that are a little bit slower. And a couple of islands up at the very top of South America. I'm not certain how they avoided it. And then looks like maybe some, is that, where would this be? Sort of Middle Eastern and Central Asian bright spots as well. But again, there, we may just have bombed everything that they could have used to detect the virus's presence there. But it was interesting because I was wondering, we've been hearing an awful lot about some of the hotspots, Italy, and of course China, and spread to some other European countries where they're having difficulties with it, Germany, France, UK having a particular problem with it now, and that too may be in part, or maybe be worsened in part because their Trump, Boris Johnson, has flubbed their response just as much as we've flubbed our own. But I was wondering why we haven't been hearing much about what's going on in Russia, which, I mean, for those of us who grew up Cold War era, or I think the question answers itself, but I'm just curious, how are they doing, and why haven't we heard either Vladimir Putin bragging about how well they're handling coronavirus or Trump bragging on his behalf? Just sort of curious about what might be driving that. All right, well, we'll hang on to those stories. Let me bookmark these two so we can share them with you later on and see what else I had put away in pocket for our use. I mentioned that the UK kind of flubbed things as well. I'll read a little bit about that one from BuzzFeed News. Alex Wickham, Mr. Wickham, reporting on events in the UK. That's happy news for those of you who are Pride and Prejudice fans, I guess, although you'll find out what happens to Wickham later. We don't want to spoil it, but right now he seems like a nice guy. The UK only realized, with an S, in the last few days, and that's enclosed in quotes, the UK only realized, quote, in the last few days, that its coronavirus strategy would, ready for this quote, likely result in hundreds of thousands of deaths. Well, that would be a good reason to take a quick U-turn on that strategy. Scientists advising the government say an aggressive new approach adopted to attempt to suppress the virus, that's in quotes too, may have to be in place for 18 months. And we don't have that kind of time, I guess. Let's find out what the hell is this stupid idea. The UK only realized in the last few days that attempts to mitigate, and that too in quotes, the impact of the coronavirus pandemic would not work, and that it needed to shift to a strategy to suppress the outbreak, according to a report by a team of experts who have been advising the government. The report, published by the Imperial College COVID-19 Response Team on Monday night, found that the strategy previously being pursued by the government, dubbed mitigation, and involving home isolation of suspect cases and their family members, but not including restrictions on wider society, wouldn't that be nice, would, quote, likely results in hundreds of thousands of deaths and health systems, most notably intensive care units, being overwhelmed many times over, i.e. what we thought was going to happen if we treated things that way, and which Italy demonstrated amply for us was in fact the case. I wonder why they thought that might work for them. I also wonder why Donald Trump might have been convinced just a few days ago that the UK was handling things so much better than everyone else that the travel ban didn't need to apply to people coming in from the UK, even though it might block all trade of any kind, goods, services, etc. Oh, wait a minute, exact opposite. Well, that's been reversed too, and I think we mentioned it a couple days ago. But certainly by mid-weekend, I think it had been decided. Yeah, that never made any sense. That was clear, and we didn't talk enough about it. We made the point certainly at the time that it was clearly political in nature, And it was about trying to support the Boris Johnson government and being pro-Brexit and anti-PC and everything else. But they had to kind of quietly reverse that because there was literally zero evidence that they had handled things any better. Their health minister had coronavirus. I mean, that's exactly the sort of traffic you would have to shut down if you were already in the business of closing your air travel. Anyway, that did get reversed, and I guess so did the policy that was supposed to be working so well for them. The mitigation strategy, quote, focuses on slowing but not necessarily stopping epidemic spread, and that's good because it wasn't possible to stop it, reducing peak healthcare demand while protecting those most at risk of severe disease from infection, the report said. That's a great goal. How are they doing it? Well, the report also reflected the UK strategy that was outlined last week by Boris Johnson and the chief scientific advisor, Patrick Vallance. Or I don't know whether he's Valance or Valance. You'll have to tell me how people are pronouncing it there. It's Vallance. But the approach was found to be unworkable. That's too bad, because you want it to work. Our most significant conclusion is that mitigation is unlikely to be feasible without emergency surge capacity limits of the UK and US healthcare systems being exceeded many times over, perhaps by as much as 8 times, the report said, which, reflects pretty much everything we heard and read about it here on the show. In this scenario, the Imperial College team predicted as many as 250,000 deaths in Britain. In the UK, this conclusion has only been reached in the last few days, the report explained, due to new data on likely intensive care unit demand based on the experience of Italy and, you'll never guess, not us, Britain, so far. Yes, their very own experience up close and personally with it. Amazing. What scientists? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Would you like to hear more about how the UK effed everything up or is in the middle of extracting itself from effing everything up? Okay, let's continue on. Where do we leave off here? Oh, yes, this conclusion had only been reached in the last few days because we only decided to do science at that point. And then we were horrified to find out that there was a real answer. So we were expecting, ready, herd immunity to build. That's what they were going to do. They were going to go the Rick Santelli route. Why don't we just let everybody get coronavirus at once, and then we'll develop herd immunity at some point. I don't know. That was the idea. We now realize that realize is spelled with an S and not a Z. That's what they realized. We now realize it's not possible to cope with that. Professor Azra Ghani, chair of infectious diseases epidemiology at Imperial, told journalists at a briefing on Monday night. And I guess is this one of the journalists whose tweets is embedded here? Let me just open it up so I can find. Yes, Science at the Times. And you'll never guess who it is. This is the most busy reporter ever. He's covering science in the UK and during the coronavirus crisis. And we know what sorts of things the coronavirus crisis has forced us all to buy in the supermarkets. Yes, this is the report of one Tom Whipple. That's right, Whipple. Mr. Whipple. That's right. Not only responsible for stocking the shelves with all of the toilet paper, at least all of the Charmin brand toilet tissue, as they like to call it, but also reporting on science for The Times, presumably The Times of London. And they really only have one time, I think, in London at a time. And it's Greenwich Mean Time. So that seems very important as well. Although why it has to be so mean, I'll never know. For those of you who are too young to know that why Tom Whipple is so interesting to us, it's an old toilet paper commercial, and it's not funny, and you can just okay boomer that, even though I'm not a boomer. Generation Xers will recognize it, and maybe a little bit younger too. I think they stopped that stuff. And then they substituted the cartoon bears who like to wipe their butts, which, that's sort of, what can you do? Millennials are different. Does that work with you? Does anything work with you? Is there anything, what makes you decide what brand of toilet paper you want to buy? That's an interesting question. Is it just whatever your parents bought? Has anybody switched brands? Has anybody sampled several kinds and decided that one is better than the other? I'm sort of curious how much experimentation in toilet tissue there really is out there. Send your answers to Tom Whipple. It's a scientific study. I'm not bothering him just because of his name. He reports on science. He'll thank you for it. All right. Well, as a result of this report, and this being the serious scientific report from from where? Imperial. But I forget already what Imperial is. It's a British Academy of some damn thing or another. And Imperial College. Yes, the Imperial College COVID-19 response team. Okay. Now that we're up to date. As a result, the report, which its authors said had informed policymaking in the UK and other countries, I hope not ours, in the last weeks, said, "We therefore conclude that epidemic suppression is the only viable strategy at the current time." A suppression strategy along the lines of the approach adopted by the Chinese authorities aims to reverse epidemic growth, reducing case numbers to low levels and maintaining that situation indefinitely. It requires a combination of social distancing of the entire population, home isolation of cases, and household quarantine of their family members, and may need to be supplemented by school and university closures. One of the interesting things, or important things that they're leaving out, and we're leaving out, of our strategy too, it seems, is yes, the Chinese were able to make this work, but they did, the Chinese have the luxury of approaching this from a slightly different perspective. They can, of course, order entire regions closed. We can try and do the same, but they also have a government infrastructure and a governmental culture that permits them to say, well, we will also conscript the services of everyone we need to in order to deliver food to the people who are socially isolating. Whereas we say, well, for the most part, you're on your own. Everyone go and gather in the grocery stores in large groups, and everyone breathe on and touch everything else that everybody else is bringing home in order to keep them alive during the crisis, and we'll see whether this works. And it might, because everybody will get to go home and wash their hands. And it's certainly better than doing nothing. But I think there were some additional measures that the Chinese were able to implement that we probably won't. But maybe, I don't know, maybe intervening earlier in the crisis. Did we intervene earlier in the crisis? I don't know. Might help things a little bit. But we don't seem to be entirely willing to adopt the Chinese strategy across the board. Also, strategies in China and, for instance, South Korea definitely involved a lot more testing and identification of asymptomatic carriers and isolating them as well. So we may have some catching up to do with all of these things. All right. Well, as they said, they do want to move to a model that requires social distancing of the entire population. An intensive intervention package will have to be maintained until a vaccine becomes available, potentially 18 months or more, the report said, painting an extraordinary picture of what life could be like in the UK for the next year and a half. I don't know if it's going to have to last that long, but we'll see. On Monday afternoon, the Prime Minister drastically tightened the measures imposed on the British public, signaling the UK's move to a suppression strategy. Everyone in the UK should now stop, quote, non-essential contact with other people and avoid pubs, that's tough, clubs, that rhymes, cinemas, as they like to say, not just cinemas, as we say here, but cinemas, and theaters, with the E and R reversed, to slow the spread of the coronavirus, Johnson announced. I think they should spell coronavirus with a Z at the end, a Z, if you will, just to confuse us. We seem to agree on virus being spelled with an S, but virus would be just as interesting. Families have also been urged to stay at home together for 14 days if any member is showing symptoms, they could say, of the virus. A new continuing cough, interesting, yes, right, or a fever. Okay, yeah, well, that's the only thing you can do with people who are symptomatic. The problem, I think, is getting on top of the asymptomatic folks as well. And I thought, I mentioned yesterday, I thought I had seen somewhere that some study had determined that perhaps the viral load in asymptomatic carriers was even higher. Really need to get on top of that one. Johnson said that anyone in isolation should avoid leaving the house, quote, even to buy food or essentials. That is true. I mean, if you're sick, definitely. Really, if you're asymptomatic and carrying it, you should be too, but it's hard to know that without the test. And you should exercise outside the house only at a safe distance from others. A government spokesperson, said, this is a very fast-moving situation. In order to give the most robust scientific advice, SAGE, the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, draws upon and considers a range of evidence and views to reach its recommendations. Part of this evidence includes the latest modeling data from a number of experts. All SAGE recommendations are in line with the best current evidence. We will be publishing further evidence shortly. We know it, you don't. And, well, all right. But what a mistake at the beginning of the onset in Britain, and why we thought that they would be the ones that we ought to be exempting from the travel ban. I have no idea, other than it's Donald Trump's crazy bias that's driving it. Okay, the other big story of the day, of course, it is Tuesday, and that means that there are primaries somewhere, and it's a pretty decent, if not necessarily super Tuesday, and we don't know exactly what to do or what's going on. Is it a good idea to be out there voting? That's usually the case, right? I don't even want to say that it might not be a good idea to be out there voting, but is it a good idea to be standing in lines? And of course, where would the lines be for casting ballots? And exactly the areas least prepared to take plenty of time off from work and do a lot of social distancing, because they tend to be poorer areas, and they tend to be working in jobs, if working in jobs at all, working in jobs with considerably less job security, certainly a lot less paid sick leave. Still working on that on Capitol Hill to see if we can't get some sort of signal to people that they will find some economic relief or have their jobs protected. I am not certain that that's going to come out the other end of this process at all in any meaningful way. Maybe negotiated away bits and pieces. But what do we do with people going out, voting, gathering, people who have to work at the polls and stay there all day and have everybody in town come through and breathe on them? The fact that we use so many touchscreen voting machines, which even prior to the virus was a problem, but now can also make you sick, as well as just turn your stomach by not having any idea whether the results are valid. But, the governors of these states have been faced with a serious question about whether or not they ought to be allowing these votes to go on. And in Ohio, we got a real problem. At the outset, the governor of Ohio, like 2 days ago, 1 day ago, the governor of Ohio said, well, it might really not be a great idea if we do this. Maybe we should postpone the primary. Other states have, one other state, and I don't even know which state it is, did decide to postpone the primary. And we're a little bit torn here, even outside of those states, people advising those states from the outside. Should we be postponing the primary without getting into the consideration of whether it's politically better for any candidates to have things postponed? May or may not be driving people's decisions. Just on health alone, we've all just become convinced that social distancing is necessary and that the schools ought to be closed, etc. And are we going to just go out and stand in line and vote now as if that didn't happen? Or is this an emergency? Is something we have to do? Is it as much a risk or less or more? We don't know. Than going to the grocery store, which everybody's been doing. Not really sure. But in Ohio, the governor shutting down lots of, doing the business shutdown thing, and restaurants closing, and bars and theaters and clubs and gyms, etc. And Mike DeWine, the governor there, thought, I think, giving him every benefit of the doubt, thought that the best idea would be to postpone things. But remember also, these are party primaries. There is a Republican primary going on, theoretically, at least for, I don't know if Ohio votes for the whole ballot up and down, president, as well as nominations for races in Congress, etc. We didn't here in Virginia. It was just presidential. But if it's just presidential there, then Republicans don't have a whole lot to turn out for. But I'm guessing, by the way they're fighting over these things, that Republicans also, Democrats and Republicans alike, are nominating people for other offices as well. But I was wondering, because if it's just the Democratic presidential primary, having a Republican governor decide to postpone it isn't without political implications. You can't simply ignore it. So I don't know, but they're going back and forth. The governor said we should postpone it. The party said, I guess, well, I don't think so. But a judge, more importantly, said, I understand your concerns, but you can't suspend a primary like hours before it's supposed to happen. And so the judge said, no, you're back on. And to which the governor said, to hell with that. It's a health emergency. If other governors can close everything, I can do this. I'm going to have the public health authorities, I don't know what they call their health secretary there in Ohio, but we'll read some articles and catch up on that. We're just going to have it closed on their orders. Let's see, I'll run through some of these stories in the order that they came to us, and I apologize that so many of them came to us from The Hill, which is not necessarily our favorite publication, but in this case, as in most cases, they're relying on aggregating and re-reporting news from elsewhere. This time, the task falls to Justine Coleman, working at The Hill, who puts out the headline, Judge Refuses to Reschedule Ohio Primary Amid Coronavirus Fears. A Franklin County judge declined to reschedule the Ohio primary set for Tuesday, despite a plea from the governor to delay voting as the state deals with a coronavirus outbreak. Common Pleas Court Judge Richard Fry, F-R-Y-E, said in his Monday ruling that it would be a terrible precedent for a judge to change the date and rules 12 hours before the election takes place. The Columbus Dispatch reported. There's the credit. Okay, the judge's decision comes hours after Ohio Governor Mike DeWine and Secretary of State Frank LaRose called for the election to be delayed as the nation deals with the coronavirus outbreak. The governor's office filed suit in Franklin County. Why? I don't know. We cannot conduct this election tomorrow, the in-person voting for 13 hours tomorrow, and conform to these guidelines, DeWine said. He's right about that, right? We should not force them to make this choice, the choice between their health and their constitutional rights and duties. DeWine is not able to delay the primary to June 2nd on his own, except in the case of an invasion. So he filed the suit in Franklin County. Why Franklin County? I'm not really sure, but is that the capital county? I don't know. Well, we could look that up. We would have to know the capital of Ohio, though. Anybody know that? And there's Columbus, right? Can we just... Now I'm super curious about this thing. Columbus, Ohio's county is, yep, Franklin County. Columbus is the county seat of Franklin County. Wait a minute. Is Columbus not, do I have that right? Am I remembering the capital of Ohio incorrectly? I better check that too. Oh man. It's been like, when do we learn our capitals? 4th grade? 5th grade? Something like that. We did use all the state capitals. I guess I'll check. Boy, how old am I? Yeah, okay, it's Columbus. I've got it correct. I'm sorry, Ohioans. You can't believe it. You're slapping your foreheads in disbelief. Well, I can't believe the shape of your state flag. So we're even. I'm very petty. Donald Trump and I would have gotten along in another life, I think. Okay, so we can't have the election tomorrow. It's just too crazy. And yes, thank you, Scott. Yeah, it says Columbus. We got it. It's a good answer, very quick, but you're on a 15-second delay, so you're at a disadvantage. I'd already Googled that, but I appreciate the remote production services there. See, social distancing. It's working. We can make it happen. Shortly after the judge's ruling, however, right? Oh, I'm sorry. I think I've skipped the paragraph here. DeWine is not able to delay it all on his own, so he filed suit in Franklin County. There we are. LaRose also announced the lawsuit's filing that he would instruct Attorney General Dave Yost, who's also a Republican, not to challenge the suit. Shortly after the judge's ruling, however, DeWine announced that Dr. Amy Action, holy cow, what a name, Dr. Action, that is fantastic. She's the director of the Ohio Department of Health, and she, it was announced, would order that all polls remain closed, and LaRose would then seek a remedy through the courts to extend voting options to Ohio residents. It's all very complicated, and I mean, it could be with the best of intentions, but I do feel like maybe they needed to involve Democratic Party authorities at some point in all of this. Even if everybody's voting for primaries for Congress, etc., the stakes are just that much higher, I think, for Ohio Democrats. And it's a little unseemly to have a team of Republicans making these decisions. Although how you're going to contain Dr. Action, I have no idea. There's just no way to restrain her. Holy mackerel. Okay, health officials have warned that older people and those with underlying health conditions should avoid public places and avoid the spread of coronavirus. And they're the big voters, right? They love getting out to vote. COVID-19 is more likely to cause serious illness or death in those demographics. Ohio was one of 4 states planning to hold its election Tuesday, along with Arizona, Florida, and Illinois. Several states, including Louisiana, Georgia, and Kentucky, have postponed their elections amid the outbreak. So I said 1. The answer is 3. Carmine said 1 state. Here are 3 that have postponed their elections. Louisiana, I think, was the one I was thinking of, though. The governor of the Buckeye State, that's Ohio, previously announced Sunday that it would close all restaurants and bars as the number of cases in the country skyrocketed. The Ohio Department of Health, under Dr. Amy Action, it doesn't say that again, but I just thought I'd throw that in there, has confirmed 50 cases in the state and 14 hospitalizations. State officials have predicted that there are more than 100,000 cases in the state. Okay. Yeah, well, that's a lot. That's a pretty good prediction, though, and it accounts for the asymptomatic, and that's probably one of the more realistic guesses. Feels like one of the more realistic guesses that I've seen. But I'm not enough of a scientist to know whether it really is all that realistic. Scott Anderson reminds us, do they say that, do they call it that? They don't call it a flag? Is that right? It's a pennant? It's certainly shaped like a pennant, but do they say the state pennant of Ohio, like we run around saying, it's not the state of Virginia, it's a commonwealth. And, do they say, we're flying the pennant of Ohio? Do they say that? I don't know. Interesting. Check it out. It's a weird shape. You and Nepal should get together in a little convention after the whole coronavirus thing is over, of course, and talk about weird flag shapes. there aren't that many weird flags. Everything's kind of standardized. So the ones that stand out are real interesting. So Ohio, they have a weird flag. Nepal, Switzerland. The Swiss flag is actually the real flag is square shaped. They don't have a rectangular one. So I guess we'll let Switzerland in there on that one too. They get included in everything because they're so neutral. All right. So Mike DeWine had more to say about this after the judge ruled, and he went to Twitter to say it because that's where official rulings are made these days when you're an executive type guy. During this time when we face an unprecedented public health crisis, to conduct an election tomorrow would force poll workers and voters to place themselves at an unacceptable health risk of contracting coronavirus. And that seems like a factual statement. It's not followed up with anything, but it seems relatively factual. It could really certainly be the case, and it could really be his concern. But like I said, there are other complicating factors in all of this. And let's see, the latest one I've got, again, I'm relying on the Hill, but let's see if they refer out to where they got their information, or maybe they reported this one by themselves, I guess, because there's no link to an outside source immediately obvious. So, all right. Justin Wise. Did Justin Wise do the same? No. It was Justine Coleman. Now, Justin Wise. So Justin and Justine teaming up on the coverage for The Hill. That's terrific. I wonder if they know one another. Ohio Health Director. You know who that is, right? To order closure of polls on primary day. That seems like an extraordinary action, but not for doctor action. That's fantastic. By the way, yes, Ohio, you're fabulous. First of all, I'm sorry about the pennant. But it occurs to me some of the most amazing names, like the names that have transfixed me and distracted me from either telling the story that I was telling or from weaving together now. I totally have to break from what I wanted to tell you to talk about the names. Ohio, also the home of Dr. Gay Hitler, DDS, I like to say at the end, although I really don't know whether there was a doctor of medical dentistry or not, but the famous early 20th century dentist Dr. Gay Hitler, we couldn't believe that name, but it's real. Same state as Dr. Amy Action. And I'm beginning to think they're just making it all up out there in Ohio. All right. Well, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, who really should be like Governor Mike Awesome or something like that. At this point, you're just missing out, Gov. Well, he announced late Monday that his administration will order the polls be closed on Tuesday. Just going to order it. This is after the judge said, no, I order the opposite. He's going to order the polls closed on Tuesday, and I don't know what's going on. Is anybody in Ohio that can tell us? Perhaps Dr. Frank Correspondent could let us know via Twitter or something like that using the KITM hashtag, please. And let us know if the polls are open. Otherwise, I'll have to Google it, and you know what that's going to mean. I won't be able to tell you until after the break. During this time when we face I'm not going to give you his statement again. We already read the one on Twitter, right? Okay. Oh, and he does have a follow-up to it. They have the follow-up. I don't. He said, well, should I read you the tweet or their interpretation of it? I'll read you both. How about that? He said, Dr. Amy Action, director of the Ohio Department of Health, would issue the order, and that Secretary of State Frank LaRose, who also needs to change his name, would then seek a remedy through the courts to extend voting options to Ohio residents. They really should have had that plan in mind. I think it might have gone over a lot smoother if the governor had said, well, listen, we're gathering the party officials from both parties and the governor's office together in a video conference to practice social distancing. We're going to hash this out with the goal of having an answer about when we're going to have our vote by Thursday, let's say, and holding the vote by April 15th somehow. We'll do it. I don't know, but that might have helped things. Well, anyway, there was the first tweet from the governor saying unprecedented public health crisis, etc. unnecessary, unacceptable health risk. And then he follows up by saying, as such, Dr. Amy Action, who you can find on Twitter as Dr. Amy Oh my God, well, I'm not sure. Now he says Acton. In the tweet, he says Acton. Is that oh my God, isn't this something? Her name is Acton. And all this time, it's not me misreading it. I went back and looked. The Hill actually prints it as Action. Yeah, Dr. Amy Action. Here it is. Let me look at the other article. Did they have it right? Did Justin get it right, or did Justine get it right? Did anybody get it right? Let's see. I don't know. Now I don't even see where that was in here. You know it's got to be in here. Yeah, Action. Dr. Amy Action. But the Twitter profile, which I assume she set up for herself or had someone set up for her, must be the correct source. Amy Acton. That is Acton. Or if you are using colloquial pronunciation, you could say Dr. Amy Acting. No, Acton would have been. As you need to say Acton is what I'm doing here. Okay. Oh, and thank you for the update here. We got take our break here, but Twister Cat has sent us the latest from the Ohio plain dealer, and that's the best kind of dealer, really. And you ask me, and with casinos being in so much trouble financially and closing left and right, you do want a plain dealer if you can get one. But here, as such, Dr. Amy Acton, Governor DeWine knew what her name really was. This is such a disappointment. Maybe the guy's name was Dr. Gay Hilter, and I screwed it up the whole time. Anyway, as such, Dr. Amy Acton will order the polls closed. Order the polls closed as a health emergency. While the polls will be closed tomorrow, Secretary of State Frank LaRose will seek a remedy through the courts to extend voting options. We already heard that part. It's time for us to take our break. And, then we'll also finish up this story, get an update, find out whether Joan can come to us via social distancing as well. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And, I'm only now coming to grips with the fact that the Ohio health official must certainly be named Dr. Amy Acton. Boring versus Dr. Action, which was fantastic. My assumption is not that I'm actually going to say it's probably not the case that the two reporters at the Hill are morons. It's probably the case that they were rushing through stories and didn't notice that probably those entries got auto-corrected to Action. I mean, that would happen, right? You put in Acton, and it would just switch it, and you'd hardly notice. It's not like it makes it a non-word, and it wouldn't even show up as, underlined as having been spelled wrong. So I hold them harmless, except for the fact that they've shattered me. I was so excited about the idea of there being a Dr. Action out there. But whatever. Okay, let's see. I guess first, does it even make sense to go on with last night's reporting about what maybe was going to happen, or should I give you the update about what's actually happening? Well, there's process involved here, so we'll go on. The announcement from the governor came at the end of the day, and of a day marked by disputes over whether Ohio's presidential primary would be delayed amid a coronavirus outbreak that has spread throughout the U.S., prompting federal, state, and local officials to recommend against large gatherings. DeWine announced earlier Monday that he would support a lawsuit to postpone the primary until June, saying that the state shouldn't force voters to pick between their health and their constitutional rights and duties. But a Franklin County judge later that evening, after many poll workers had reportedly been told the election was off, rejected the suit, ruled that it would be a terrible precedent for a judge to change the date and rules 12 hours before the election takes place. Health officials have warned that elderly people, well, you know what they're warning. So, let's see. There's a little bit more here. The Ohio Department of Health has confirmed 50 cases in the state, 14 hospitalizations. Of course, there are dire predictions that there are more than 100,000 cases in the state, and the other states also considering what to do with their primaries. Now, the actual news from the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Thanks to Twister Cat for sending this along. Ohio polls, what's it going to be? Open? Closed? Remain closed. That's right. They're closed following overnight ruling from the Ohio Supreme Court. Okay. Columbus, Ohio is our dateline, of course. That's where all this is taking place. Andrew Tobias, our writer. Ohio's polling places are closed on what was to have been the state's presidential primary. And they keep saying presidential, so maybe that was all there was, which makes this problem all the more difficult when it comes to deciding whether or not DeWine should have unilaterally taken care of this. Anyway, we got an overnight ruling on this from the Ohio Supreme Court. The Supreme Court effectively allowed the election to be postponed from March 17th in a remarkable early morning decision on a complaint from a Wood County judicial candidate. Oh, so I guess maybe there's more than just the presidential primary after all. And at least in Wood County, they've got a judicial election going on. After requiring the state to respond before 1:30 a.m., citing the exigent circumstances, 4 judges issued an unsigned decision unanimously rejecting the complaint, which had been filed before Governor Mike DeWine's administration issued a public health order closing the polls over the new coronavirus. 2 judges running for re-election, Justices Judith French and Sharon Kennedy, and Pat DeWine, who is DeWine's son, did not participate. Got it? So in the Supreme Court, they're elected. And 2 of the people who were running for election, I guess, recused themselves from the decision on whether or not to postpone the election, as did Mike DeWine's son, Pat. Son? Yes, son. Just making sure. How did he get on the court? One wonders. Okay. Well, if they're elected, right? The people of Ohio wanted it to happen for some reason. They saw the DeWine name on the ballot and just couldn't help themselves. Referring to a separate state-backed lawsuit that a Franklin County judge declined to act on earlier Monday evening, Corey, what are we going to say? Spiewak? I don't know. Spewiek. I don't know. I know of some people who have that last name and it's pronounced Spiewak, and I don't think I've ever seen it written. So why don't we go with that? It feels like one of those names that might actually be pronounced that way, even though it looks like it's spelled in a different way. Well, anyway, this advocate here, I believe, in the courtroom, argued that courts had no right to try to block the election date, which is set in law. We've got a lot of weird dynamics going on from this virus. Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, Justice Pat Fisher, both Republicans, and Justices Michael Donnelly and Melody Stewart, both Democrats, disagreed. Michael Donnelly couldn't wait to get to the St. Patrick's Day celebration, I bet. Might not be Irish, but possibly. They did not explain their reasoning. I think we know what Michael Donnelly's was. The Supreme Court proceedings began before Governor Mike DeWine's health department director ordered the polls closed in an emergency public health order that cited the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. DeWine said voters should not be made to choose between their health and their right to vote. The winding legal proceedings and confusion over what the Franklin County judge had ruled led to chaos within state government and county elections boards last night. One state lawmaker called the decision a constitutional crisis, but Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, the state's top elections official, has said the state's polls are closed. He tweets this out. Ohio's polls are not open today. Governor DeWine and Dr. Amy, and he's not using the Twitter handles here, he just happens to know that her name is actually Dr. Amy Acton, have ordered polling locations closed to prevent the spread of the deadly coronavirus, and point you to the website for proof, because if it's online, it's true. In the late-night text message, LaRose said he had directed county boards of election to hold the primary on June 2nd, with absentee ballots accepted until June 1st. It's unclear whether the move will prompt additional lawsuits, but you can probably bet that it will. Okay, So that's it. We're up to date on that one. It's another crazy development thanks to the coronavirus. All right, let's see. I guess we'll sum up. I don't know. We'll probably have to come back on coronavirus. Let's see. Maybe what we'll do, we'll pass on this and just note in passing the headline on Mark Sumner's piece, which was up late yesterday, just sort of updating us on the experiences of yesterday. The United States passes 4,500 cases, and people are beginning to realize what's coming. Of course, Ohio authorities predicting that they'll have 100,000 in the end, just in Ohio alone, or not even in the end, that there are currently 100,000 out there that they just don't know about. We're counting confirmed cases. This is how slow the testing is going here. 4,500 cases confirmed in the United States, and 100,000 expected in Ohio alone. Here comes Joan. And we have the volume all the way up on that ringer, I guess. Good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning, Kagro. How are you?
Fine so far. You know,
Yeah.
I have been, as you know, self-isolating for about 15 years now.
I know. I'm having a hard time relating to people on Twitter talking about how weird this is.
It has been an experience, although I've also enjoyed the added experience of, for all the years that I was self-isolating anyway, and all of 20-something Twitter and Netroots Nation, et cetera, out there say, why aren't you coming to our thing? And we haven't seen you in a while, and why don't you should get a babysitter? Come on out here. And now they are all 30-somethings and have toddlers, and they just don't know what to do. And my kids are teenagers, and I haven't seen them in years anyway. So, we're all self-isolating pretty good. How do I entertain my 14 and 19-year-old? Do nothing. They don't.
Yeah, they figure it out.
I just put food out like they're cats. So, as far as I know, they're flushing the toilet. So, what can I do? To me, it's fine. My kids also taking to social distancing like fish to water. But, you and I, we have some practice in all of this. Everybody is scrambling. Ivanka Trump, in fact.
Making her tents for her kids and out of bed sheets.
And brooms, which is, I'm amazed that I know she probably knows where to find sheets, but the brooms, that I'm surprised at. I'm sure she put out the order early this morning. Find me whoever it is who knows whether we have brooms, and then bring them in here.
Those sticky things that you can make tents out of.
What are they? Yeah, I know. I see them, people walking around using them to, I imagine, clean. Where did they go? I'm sure they could hold our tents up. So, she's advising everybody that a fun activity to do is to build a tent inside with the kids. And it is a fun activity, and you don't not do it just because Ivanka says it's fun.
No.
Go ahead.
But, it would help if you had staff to give you free time to be playing with your kids that way.
For instance...
some people are perhaps trying to work while they're home with their children.
That's right. And she's supposed to be, because she's a high government official. And also, one might ask, who took that picture of her and her kids in the tent? And the answer is somebody who would rather be home, but isn't, because it wasn't Jared. Okay. All right. So what else is news? I don't know. The whole country's under lockdown or something like that. What's the state of affairs where you are? You have to be home?
You're making me paranoid, to be honest.
Okay.
We have 5 confirmed cases.
That's enough.
Which seems quite low.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't changed in 2 days.
That's good.
Maybe it is just 5. Maybe nobody's being tested and we have absolutely no clue, which I think probably is likelier.
I think so.
But, Idaho is sort of... Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, for some reason, all escaped it for a little while. We're behind, I think, certainly Washington, Oregon, and East Coast states by maybe a week. As near as I can tell, I don't know. I don't know who's been tested. But the restrictions are starting to come down. So
okay.
Here in Boise, city offices are closed. State DMV is closed.
Okay.
Libraries closed.
Yeah.
All of these things. So there is some response.
Okay.
And they're following CDC guidelines saying no gatherings over 50 people.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. You know, at least they're taking. Everyone needs to take it seriously. I guess it's good news. It feels funny, but you know, the most effective program of social distancing will be the one that felt like it was premature and unnecessary at the time it was imposed. So.
I hope we have social distancing. I was talking about some of this on Twitter, and somebody from down here being, you know, Idaho is the tall state.
Yes, right.
Big fat at the bottom, tall and skinny at the top.
Right.
People in the north apparently don't feel like it's an issue because the cases have all been in southern Idaho.
Uh-huh.
It was somebody's sister who she had to remind lives right across the border from Spokane.
Right.
So the virus doesn't really recognize that there's a state border there.
No, it doesn't know.
In her head, all of the cases in Idaho are in the south, so it doesn't. She's okay. She's safe.
You know, that's not necessarily the way it works. But yeah, up in the north, I guess they probably feel pretty safe on the Montana side. But you know, Washington State hotspot, Spokane. I mean, how's Spokane doing just generally? I mean, Seattle was a real hotspot. Just because Spokane's in the same state doesn't mean they've got it, but maybe they have it anyway on their own. I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know how many are in Spokane.
All right.
I should have been paying attention to this to see how we're out generally on the West Coast.
Well, you gotta.
Nonetheless, it's here.
You had to do shopping.
And it's frustrating when it's up largely to state and local governments to figure this out because Trump's not doing anything. So we don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
There are no tests. We don't know how many people have been tested. Supposedly it's less than 300. I know just because I have a neighbor who works at the local hospital that for the last couple of weeks they've at least been testing people in ICUs. I don't know if they've tested them beyond ICUs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, probably not. The testing numbers are extraordinarily low everywhere.
Extraordinarily low. Terrifyingly low.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do is respond to that by social distancing.
Right. Not everybody practicing it, but at least the suggestions being strongly made in the cities, I would hope, and maybe in other places, social distancing is built in some parts of some rural states, kind of.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Okay. I imagine that helps too. And with our situation here, of course, locking down most things, restaurants remaining open for takeout, but I'm wondering eventually supply chains are going to start straining, and we'll start opening things back up again little by little. If we go and pick up Five Guys and we want those French fries, we're going to depend on people going to work in Idaho and shipping us some potatoes. And, we can't make you guys have the virus just so we have French fries. That's not right, but I don't know.
Well, having your French fries is very important.
It is. A lot of people think so. Although maybe a lot of people who are harvesting the potatoes are distanced. They're in their harvesting machines and probably hardly anybody else around while they're driving anyway. You can enclose those things. But then I feel like there's some other people on the ground who might have to do some work to get potatoes to us. So
yes, there is a supply chain, which is one of the things to think about. If you are taking care of somebody sick or worried or particularly vulnerable about getting sick, there are a lot of people on every product that you bring into your house who have touched it.
Yeah. Yes, you were
So
telling
if
us
you're
about
taking
that.
care of somebody sick, if you're worried, if you are particularly vulnerable yourself, if you're immunosuppressed, think about the things coming into your home and thinking about how you can minimize your risk of picking up something. Yeah, on a potato, no, probably it does not live on the surface of a potato. But the sacks, the plastic, the packages, just my tip from having lived with somebody who was immunosuppressed while we were taking care of somebody who was undergoing chemo is wash your hands after every delivery that you bring into the house. Wash your hands after you put away the groceries.
Yeah.
Wash off the can before you open it. Just have that little extra level of, this is something from outside the house that could possibly have come from the mailman who's been to every house in the neighborhood and has touched everything.
Yeah. I'm very very aware of it now, and from our having talked about it last time as well, just how many places there are to contaminate your hands, yourself, your house, all the preparation that hopefully we've all been doing to hide away from the virus. It may very well mean that we have packed tiny boxes of virus all over our house.
Yes.
And that's not very effective. There's a lot of washing to be done here, and a lot of hand washing in between. And I have, already like 19 times washed my hands, gone on to do something, and then gone, I just contaminated my hands again.
Yes.
Which is why people want the hand sanitizer, but there's none to be had. But it's amazing. So you come in with even if you shop with gloves on, I've seen that increasingly in our area.
I was very glad to see that at my local food co-op is just a few blocks away, so I tend to get a lot of stuff there, even though it's very expensive because it's right there. Mm-hmm. But, all of the staff wearing their gloves and taking it seriously.
It's good news.
Yeah, take it seriously and wash your towels frequently.
Yes, I
your
started
hand
doing
towels.
that too. That also was good advice I heard from you last time, and made sure I went out and got more detergent to hide away too, thinking my water bill's going to be through the roof, but we'll hopefully be able to avoid illness for longer.
Yes, hopefully.
Lots of washing. Okay.
So let's talk news.
Okay.
Not personal hygiene, because obviously I've done that with you and it gets boring. The news is Mitch McConnell is still showing a great sense of urgency by maybe rolling around to having a vote on something this afternoon.
Okay. That's a big hurry for him.
I'm sure yesterday you talked about Mitch McConnell's weekend in Kentucky.
We certainly mentioned the fact that they took a nice long break and stood around doing nothing. The fact that they stopped working over the weekend at all, pretty amazing. But what he was doing, an event of some kind with Brett Kavanaugh, and I couldn't immediately figure out what would a guy with a lifetime appointment be doing an event for. What was the event?
The event was the investiture, if that's what you call it, of Justin Walker. The 37-year-old law professor, former clerk of Kavanaugh, who the ABA said was not qualified because he has absolutely no experience whatsoever in courtrooms to be on the federal bench, getting on the federal bench.
Okay.
That was what he had to go to Kentucky for.
All right. Well, he really didn't, but okay.
It was purely ceremonial. He's been seated since he was confirmed.
Oh. So
this was just a nice little family gathering brunch kind of thing.
Yeah, over 10 people, no doubt.
That's what Mitch McConnell was doing.
Okay. Well, maybe he's
over the weekend instead of passing the House bill.
Yeah. Okay.
And the difficulty in the delay is that it caused a lot of time for mischief. What could have happened, the Senate didn't even have to come back. They could have just said, okay, unanimous consent, we're going to let this go through.
True. Yes.
It would have taken 2 people in the Senate over the weekend.
Right. Nice small group. Very good.
But no. They came back yesterday afternoon to a great deal of confusion, to Ron Johnson saying things like, well, if we pass this, it's incentive for people not to go to work.
But
yeah, well, that's kind of the point.
You got me there, Ron. But it is. Yeah, all right. But, I mean, at the moment, that's what we're trying to incentivize. That's confusing for those guys. They've been raised to think that that's a terrible thing in all situations, I guess. And
well, it is Ron Johnson.
Yeah.
Genius.
Okay.
So Johnson, I don't know where he's at. We've got, oddly, Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley saying it doesn't do enough to get money into people's pockets.
Yes, this could be such a moment.
So Hawley wants to give, and this is just amazing to me, monthly cash to people.
Yes. Like Andrew
Nearly
Yang.
$1,500 for a family of 3. He monthly benefits, cash benefits.
Yeah. I mean, okay.
Monthly. I'm just...
Isn't this amazing?
Cotton wants to do the same. I don't know. I'm not seeing if his is one time or through the duration. He wants $1,000 for adult tax filers making less than $100,000 and $500 for each claim dependent for single people. I don't know if this is their play to try to derail the bill as it goes to the floor in the Senate, hopefully this afternoon. We're complicated by the fact that the House, which did pass some technical corrections last night, having overcome the objection of Louis Gohmert.
I like the fact that he's in control of things.
Yeah, Louis Gohmert is in control. Yay.
Okay.
He finally relented. They passed their technical corrections. The House is not in session this week.
Yes, they weren't.
So what really needs to happen is that this bill passes today so that they can start working on the next stuff that they're going to do. And it's not all going to be done at once. It can't all be done at once, and they have to start acting at some point soon to do what they can.
Yeah.
If the Senate doesn't pass it this afternoon, if they add all of this stuff, which maybe it's great, maybe Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley's stuff is terrific, but it can happen in the next bill. We need the paid leave to happen right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And
yeah, I see what you mean. So they might add something that might actually sound pretty good, but it
could take days more to get everything through, and then we have to think of, okay, do we bring the whole House back? Is it possible to pass this by unanimous consent? Yeah. Some Louis Gohmert stands up in the House and says, no, I won't. So we don't have this time, and they seem not to realize that this is an emergency.
Yeah.
It's incredible to me. It is incredible to me that this is the state of where we're at. We've got all of these old dudes hanging out in the Senate who should have more of a sense of morbidity.
Yeah, you would think.
To tell you the truth, and urgency.
Right. And they must, yeah, I mean, I guess, does it not occur to them that they keep flying back and forth and, that's a risk too?
Apparently, as more people are getting sick, more staff and more Congress people are having to self-isolate.
Yes.
It is occurring to them. One, Scott Wong of the Hill, tweets that one senior lawmaker told him that their sentiment that they need to just get this done so that they can get out and not come back to this petri dish for a while.
Yes, that would probably help things if they could get that done. No, all right. How interesting, though, that what a moment it is that some of our most conservative senators are for stuffing cash in everyone's pocket. Although I see that the language it sounded like the language you were talking about was for tax filers, which also perhaps poses a problem. Everybody, needs to stop and think of. There are a lot of people who would be in need of cash who are not tax filers because taxes won't be due. They don't make enough. So like the earned income tax credit, it's going to be refundable. It's something that people can claim through the tax system, even though they don't file. And will they know how to get it? I don't know. So it does feel like maybe they don't really mean it. I don't know. But they're all turning into Andrew Yang. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is still with us, and as we leave off, it's a big mystery that I can't quite figure out, and I guess it's just not clear yet. The rhetoric is right. You mentioned to me during the break, and I guess you should tell everybody, McConnell has brought the Senate in and has attempted to lay out what he's up to, but we're just not sure why he's up to it exactly.
No, and what exactly he has in mind. He says that the House bill is non-comprehensive and only the beginning.
Yes.
But talks about how they met last night. A group of Republican senators met with Mnuchin. Those were the Ron Johnson types. I think that he got them convinced to come around to perhaps supporting this. He's returning to the Capitol to meet with our entire conference today. Okay, so there's a meeting today after which there may be a vote on something. But then he says he announces three. This is Craig Kaplan from C-SPAN tweeting. He announces 3 GOP priorities and talks for a future coronavirus bill, which is the direct assistance to workers and families that Cotton and Hawley are inexplicably talking about.
Yes.
Stronger steps to a secure economy, especially for small businesses, provide support that medical professionals need to fight the virus, which all sounds like good things. He says, it's my intention that the Senate will not adjourn until we have passed significant and bold new steps above and beyond what the House passed to help our strong nation and our strong underlying economy weather the storm. It sounds to me as though he is saying pass the House bill and then immediately do another one. But
that would be okay.
That would be fine. It would be a great start. And it would mean the House would not have to come back immediately and give us a little bit of breathing room for this second round of stimulus.
Well, that would be the better way. If
that's what he's talking about doing. And we still don't know exactly what the Senate is going to do this afternoon.
Yeah. So procedurally, if the decision is, I guess this is how you can evaluate everything at home, is if the decision is, they have the opportunity to pass a House bill that has some paid leave relief in it. They overcompromised, I think.
They did overcompromise
on what should be given away there, but if they pass the House bill, the paid leave aspects would, I guess, be sent to the president's desk where he would lose them or whatever. But unless he vetoes them, it's not an issue. They have other ideas, and it's true that this is only the start of what's necessary for coronavirus. So the question procedurally is, does McConnell say, fine, pass what the House has given us and then work on something new so that when we're done with it, by the time we're done with it, the House will be back and they can vote on it? Or is he saying it all has to go in one package, which would just be a wink, wink. we're also going to delay the paid leave by insisting that everything that needs to be done for coronavirus be done in this one bill, except for things we think of later.
And that's what's not absolutely clear right now, although NBC is reporting that what they're talking about is phase 3. So that would suggest, yes, they pass this one today and then go on to the next one, which they're calling phase 3. I hope so.
Sure, that would be
really
great.
Leanne Caldwell from NBC is reporting that there's lots of momentum to act and to act quickly. Yeah.
All right.
After 4 days off, they're acting quickly.
Yes. All right. Well, okay. So now they're feeling the pressure. That's a good thing. And maybe that'll move them to act, at least on paid leave. And I don't see why they would. Well, they're Republicans, so there's always the possibility that they wouldn't. But this is a pretty weak bill.
These people should be showing up at work.
Yeah. The president said it was okay to do that, although he may or may not have changed his mind yesterday.
Well, and then there's the president, who last night was saying, I support this bill that the House passed, but, we can go back and forth with the House, and the Senate's going to come up with something, and it can go back and forth with the House.
Mm-hmm.
No, Trump, really, just shut up.
Well,
shut up.
It's back and forth. He still doesn't really get it. He's still shaking hands with everybody at his coronavirus briefings. So, I guess.
And he's under the impression that the Senate was working with the House on this bill. The Senate was not working with the House on this bill. McConnell said, "You guys do it," to Mnuchin and Pelosi, and had nothing to do with it.
Well, he may not know anything about what's going on at all anywhere.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. There are other things going on, of course. Mitch McConnell would love to distract himself with other stuff.
He would love to distract himself with judicial appointments.
Wow. What a change.
So much so that he's actually trying to get sitting judges appointed by Republicans to retire already.
Oh, yeah. Older. Yeah. Okay. So he can replace Republican. Well, I guess only Republicans would listen to him about retiring. That's why he's picking them. I see.
I would assume so, and he can assume that they're, ideologically on his same page. So sure, they'll listen to this. He is such a ghoul. He is just such a ghoul. He's already got more than 50 appeals court judges.
Yeah.
Right now, there's only one appeals court vacancy.
Oh, so he's run out of vacancies and wants to create more.
Yeah, yes, he wants to create more because there's only one left now.
Oh, how exciting is that? Not at all. Gotta get more.
Well, 50 appeals court judges are Trump judges.
That's a lot.
Because the appeals court is, the really important one on the pathway up to the Supreme Court. It was the appeals court in the Fifth Circuit that is now saying, well, maybe we won't ever have the Affordable Care Act again. Maybe the whole thing is unconstitutional and could go away on the basis of a really, really stupid, frivolous challenge.
Yeah. So, yeah,
we're all going to die, Kagro. We're all going to die, and the Supreme Court doesn't care. Neither does Mitch McConnell.
That's their plan, and they're sticking to it. And
those more than a quarter of these judges are Trump judges.
Yeah,
more than a quarter of the appeals court is Trump. And they're young.
Yes,
they're in their 30s and 40s.
Yeah. And they're committed, they're unqualified, and of course the whole point of these guys is they're committed to, the Gimmitarian school of legal interpretation and legal and judicial canon.
In which government is small enough to go up women's uteruses.
Yes, or just do whatever they want, right? Government is big when they want it to be big, small when they want it to be small, just so long as libs lose and cry so that they can drink their tears. They don't really care how incomprehensible the precedent is, how unworkable the precedent is, and what the unforeseen implications of the precedents are. They want to win their cases, and that's all. And they don't care whether their reasoning is sound. And a quarter of them are into that, and it's only been 3 years, so it's a pretty amazing thing all by itself. And now I guess he's looking to make it even more than that. So if you were appointed by George H.W. Bush, maybe Reagan even.
There are still some Reagan judges around.
Yeah, people who were appointed when they were in their 30s and 40s last time and were supposed to sit on the court for 40 years, and now they've done it. And they're looking to replace them with, I guess, teenage judges who will live forever.
And love beer.
Yeah, right. True, also. That helps. It's a big qualification. And coronavirus won't even get them. That's the sad part. So, all right.
So what that means is, we have to get a new Senate. We have to get Mitch McConnell out of the Senate. But it also means we need a Democratic Senate and a Democratic president, creative enough, ruthless enough to try to blunt the effect of all of these Trump judges. Yeah. Whether it's expanding courts. Well, it's expanding courts. I mean,
kind of it, really.
It is pretty much it. You could argue that some of what Clarence Thomas has done is impeachable because it's been so highly politicized. You could perhaps argue that Kavanaugh might be impeachable because the process that sat him was not legitimate.
Mm-hmm. You could make that argument. It would be good.
But it would be easier to just add seats to blunt their effect.
So there are other alternatives that could be explored. Yeah, that's definitely true. Got to have a Democratic Senate first at a minimum,
and you've got to have a Democratic Senate willing to do that.
Yeah, that's
and a president willing to do that. So it's going to mean a vice president for Biden who is willing to do that and push him into it.
That's true too, and Biden was never super enthusiastic, say, about even the changing the filibuster rules, which was, not surprising given who Biden was, although it was a little bit surprising given that the last time they actually changed the filibuster rules, he voted for that. He was there in 1975, a brand new senator, and you'd think it would stick out in his mind a little more, but seems to have forgotten. But now that it's been done, he might be more comfortable with the idea, and the question is, who will his vice president be? Who might have to sit in the chair to rule on that, although the rulings tend to be handed to you by parliamentarians, so we need a good reader, I guess. So someone who has a good reading voice would be a good vice president.
Yes.
So
among the women that we know, probably all of them would have a good voice.
Yeah, they all seem to be pretty
I'm
good
sure
at
you
that.
talked about that, the big moment of the Sunday night debate.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it enough. We may not have made mention of it because coronavirus, yada yada. But I don't know how interested Greg was in the debate versus the biggest moment of his medical life. But
right,
but yeah. So Biden pledged to choose a woman vice president. I understand Bernie Sanders was a little less willing to commit, but although quite honestly, it's not it's a big decision. I would say I hadn't really thought about that yet, and I mean, we asked to pledge right here, right now on television. I'm open to that, but that didn't look
that's
good,
pretty much what Bernie said. He was not expecting that out of Biden. He was not expecting that question.
Yeah, it's a toughie. I mean, just in terms of being on the spot, like this is a big decision to make right now. If he hadn't thought it through. So maybe that was strategically very wise, perhaps from Biden.
It was really the only news out of the debate.
Yeah, which was fine.
Coronavirus,
Yeah, though again, they I did think people said there could have been quite a moment for Bernie Sanders to, point out, and he made an attempt at it, I understand, but the whole thing could have been like, now you're all seeing what I've been saying the whole time. Oh, Bernie Sanders is crazy. He wants to give money away to workers all the time, and now is Tom Cotton wants to give away money to workers. Just what's his name? The Hawley kid, Josh.
Hawley.
Yeah,
I'm just
the
still
Hawley
gobsmacked
kid.
with that. But Bernie did do that to an extent in the debate, and did try to sort of steer it that way. But I think just the enormity of how screwed up everything is right at this moment, was stronger for Biden in saying, "Look, we've got to get in there and just deal with this right now before we can think about the revolution."
Okay. Yes, I understand that. And, Bernie might have the right sense in saying you can't make the coronavirus crisis a moment to say, me, I was right, especially if he's campaigning on not me.
Right.
So,
right.
Maybe he struck the right balance there after all. I feel like, more people are going to have to come to this realization, but, they have different names for it. They're so upset about coming to the realization that some of this stuff has been correct, whether it's because Bernie Sanders proposed it or Democrats proposed it or whatever. We got to come up with a reason why this is the right thing to do that doesn't credit the people who thought of it, because it's those guys. So I'm thinking like Hawley and Cotton surely have, working on titles for their bills, the totally non-socialism giveaway of money to people.
Of all of the people in the Senate who you would not expect to come up with humane policy, Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley are pretty high up on that list.
Yeah,
I'm rather astounded.
Yeah,
but good for them.
It makes me think.
Let's try to get this in there, and yes, as you said, try to make sure it goes to people who really need it, as well as the people who can file taxes.
Right. So,
but there's so much more that needs to be done. Student loan forgiveness for the duration, credit card forgiveness for the duration, no evictions, no utility cutoffs. For some people, rent and mortgage payments have to end.
Yeah.
There's just so much for people who are living paycheck to paycheck, which the vast majority of the American public is.
Yeah, and that they often don't realize in the Senate. But there's a lot and there's a lot of relief that will have to be offered, and I'm hopeful will be offered that was previously, people have floated it for various reasons. Oh, it's impossible. Think about what it would do to the economy, and I guess once your economy already collapses, you might consider some other things. But sure, all this assistance is going to become very necessary. And a large group of people who used to say no way, to totally unfair, as where's my bailout, or who are now going to be getting bailouts, will now start to say bailouts are okay.
Bailouts are okay. One of the things that you can't argue with, and this is going to be a difficult problem for liberals, for progressives, and I have kind of a problem with it too, is that these bills from Cotton and Hawley are means tested.
Yeah.
Do we want to go the route of means testing in a crisis? Or do we just, no, I would say ideologically, no, don't means test. You just don't.
Yeah, it's just red tape that kind of gets in the way, and
it sets bad precedents.
Yes.
On the other hand, people have got to start getting this aid, so do we swallow it? That's something that we're going to have to figure out and talk through.
Yeah, I guess so. Plus, of course, the growing list of industries that say they'll legitimately need bailouts is starting to include some places where it's like, well, weren't you saving some money for a rainy day, Mr. Casino? What happened?
Yeah.
I don't understand. Yeah, the casinos in particular, of course, last night, as I'm realizing, they're on the bailout list. Casinos, are they not sitting on piles of cash? They have a lot of people to pay. I understand that. But I've been in casinos. They have granite countertops in casinos, for God's sake.
Marble.
Right. And refrigerators, every single one of them, It's like all the excuses that
Although,
they used to use
no
to say.
coffee pots in any of the hotel rooms.
Oh, well, is that a general practice? They don't do that?
They don't do that. They want you to have to go through the casino part of the hotel to be able to get your coffee.
Oh, okay. I mean, I've been in one, but I don't think I took note of it.
I hate Las Vegas.
I don't. Yeah, you know what I did like about the only thing I liked about Las Vegas was it was very easy and open about money and easy to understand. That if you pay people money, tip them, all things get better for you.
Well, that's true.
That I understood, and I thought I was sort of like, okay, that's very. I don't know. That's somehow very honest. It's also very, corrupt in a way, but anyway. Yeah, I was astonished at all these. But I remembered all the things that Republicans used to say about when they didn't want to help people. And all of these things are true of or easily applicable to casinos. Granite countertops. Remember, you can't have what was it?
Right.
The S chip because that person
it
has
was
granite
S chip because you have a
countertops.
granite countertop.
So they have granite countertops there, and yet people on public assistance who have big TVs and
cell phones.
Right, cell phones and refrigerators. That was the most absurd one. Refrigerators. Of course they have refrigerators. Right. Yeah. Well, there's refrigerators in every one of those hotel rooms, for God's sake. And they charge you money every time you open them.
Speaking of empty hotel rooms.
Yes.
Quarantining people.
Oh.
I mean, I really think that we should be seizing hotels that are going to be empty anyway and give them something for putting sick people there. But, for people who are sick who don't have to be in the ICU, put them in a hotel room. For people who need to be quarantined because we don't know, put them in a hotel room.
Mm-hmm. They're going to have to clean down those hotel rooms, and you usually have to clean them every day anyway. So, well, now you'll have to sterilize them. That'll put lots of people to work, and we could probably help you with the costs of extra cleaning crews and extra cleaning supplies.
It's not going to cost the government anything right now to borrow a lot of money to do this.
That's true too. Right, interest rates at near zero. So that's a good point. Another one, and I assume that they'll think it's a good one because they lowered the interest rates for a reason. I didn't know what it was, but it's this.
That's as good a reason as any.
Yeah. By the way, another one of the old excuses that they used to use. I saw one of these casinos that's on public assistance, and they were buying steak and lobster. Can you believe it? Right. So I guess we're going to be having casino buffets with nothing but government cheese from now on. Because they're on public assistance. But okay, recognize where your money comes from, and put some of it away. It doesn't all have to be reinvested in whatever. It's fresh tropical flowers in every lobby table. Right? I don't know. They spend money hand over fist in casinos. It's what they do. But they're taking it.
But now they're going to get a bailout because Trump. Because of course Trump.
Right. Along with the oil and gas industry, which never makes any money, and a lot. Why aren't all these companies? Why are they spending all their money on avocado toast? These companies, they would not need bailouts if they weren't doing this. I don't understand. When I was these casinos' age, I worked my way through the recession. This all is true and never comes back to bite anybody. I never understand why we can't do that. But
I don't either.
Oh well.
Because we live in a profoundly unfair world.
That must be it. Oh.
Where we can't have anything nice.
Sigh. All right. Well, still, we try.
Speaking of which, you know who had a plan for fixing all of this, for responding to coronavirus weeks and weeks and weeks ago?
How could I possibly know who had a plan for anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Oh, and I did see the other day Biden endorsing her bankruptcy reform
bill. Yes.
So, okay, good. This is what
Which was in direct opposition to the bankruptcy bill that they fought over how many years ago? A decade ago?
Yes, 15 years, I guess, now, because it was 2005.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. So, yeah, it's been quite a while, and it was nice to see that. And this is the dynamic that happens in primaries: is the best ideas get stolen if the candidate who has them doesn't win, and or those people become secretary of something.
Yes. No, I wasn't even stealing. The campaigns talked, and for Warren, it's more that her ideas succeed than that she does.
You would think, yeah. I mean, they're important ideas. That's why she's writing them down.
Yeah.
And, right. So that also helps answer, well, why no endorsement right away? Well, you use a little bit of leverage and say, maybe my endorsement comes, the more of my ideas you adopt, the more I'd be inclined. I would have better reason to endorse you. Right now, I have a political one, but let's make it a policy reason to endorse you. Because I value
She's a smart cookie.
Yes, as it turns out. Maybe it's best that we free her from the strictures. We can console ourselves with this. Free her from the strictures of this confining office and just let her freelance the ideas all around somebody else who's going to stand there and cut the ribbons and sign the papers. I wouldn't mind giving her a chance at it, of course. Who knows what could happen if you have the entire federal apparatus at your command. But if it's at the command of someone who will listen to you, that will help too.
I would really love for her to be the vice president pick in a lot of ways, but I'd also love her to be on the Supreme Court. I'd love her to be Treasury Secretary. I want Elizabeth Warren cloned at maybe age, 55, 60.
She may go for that too.
To be everything. Be everything.
All right. That's
we'll see.
I can't make it happen, but it's a nice thought. But many things that we thought were impossible are becoming
But it
possible
could give us the best of both worlds to have a Elizabeth Warren vice presidency if the Biden president would be listening to her, letting her do stuff.
Yes. And
what it would be, he continued to be what he was as vice president under Obama, Uncle Joe, that everybody liked.
Yes. Right.
With a partner who's doing all the work.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to argue for Biden in terms of continuity.
Yes.
For the rest of the world to look to say, okay, this makes sense. We're going back to what it was before Trump. They're restoring that. There's a lot of goodwill toward Obama and Biden internationally. He might be able to restore that more quickly than anybody else could, just because he already has that foundation. All of these ways I'm trying to convince myself that it's going to be okay to have Biden as the nominee.
Yes, well, you have to think of anything you can, grasping at straws perhaps, but something that...
But the continuity argument actually is a big one.
The
being able to slide in as president because you were the vice president just 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's something to argue for that. There's a lot to argue against it, but there's a lot to argue for it as well.
Right. Now,
it's what we got. We got to look for the silver linings.
All right. We'll see, and we'll see what sort of developments are on the vice presidential nomination front. Also, I will point out that if Biden is doing all of the Uncle Joe stuff, and let's say Elizabeth Warren was doing all the work, I must point out the vice president's salary is $235,000 versus the president, whose salary is $400,000. So pay equity could be a very early issue for a Democratic Senate, let's say.
Very much
that
so.
Would be terrific thinking. Now they might want to solve that.
Is there a great deal of sexism in that idea? Yes, there is. I acknowledge that, and I do have a problem with it.
Yeah.
But,
right.
I was sure any way we could get Elizabeth Warren to be president, I am, or acting president, I'm down with.
Yes. I mean, it's a goddamn emergency out here. Seriously.
Yes.
Yeah, I had no doubt that you would acknowledge that. It occurred to me, what is the vice president's salary? That might be too low.
Shut up. Don't you love having the world at your fingertips?
Yes, it's terrific. And those, I guess, would be essential workers during the coronavirus shutdowns. And make sure, a lot of unforeseen things, and we're going to find out a lot of things that are really important that we didn't necessarily know were important. And as all the
and
kids,
we'll talk about it next Tuesday.
Right. So we'll talk about it, and we'll continue our distance learning experiment here on the show as well. Thanks very much, Joan, for helping us learn at a distance. Stay safe and healthy. Thanks again, and all right, we'll all wash our hands and take your advice, your good advice. Repeating it to 2 weeks in a row, even 3-4 weeks in a row, is most welcome. The more you say it, the more people will do it. So I appreciate it.
All righty. Talk to you next week.
Take care. Let's go forward into the world and figure out what else is going on. By that measure, our job here to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam at this point for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's see if we can't figure out a little bit of what's going on here. New York's governor says we need a federal response, and that would be a nice thing, as he announced widespread closings with 2 fellow governors of the tri-state area there.
From Daily Co's Radio,
New Jersey and
on
Connecticut.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Important story we didn't get to, but the Justice will. Bill Barr has moved to drop charges against the Mueller-indicted Russians, but says that the reason for the cover-up of the Russian attack is a secret. It, too, will be covered up. Let's see if we can't pry in under the hood and take a guess at what that's all about with Justice Putnam.